Chapter 30. Ambler's nurse shrieked at him, now in reproach rather than in warning. Had he only listened to his instincts, the Swiss guard would not have been dead, and Ambler would not be staring death in the face. He shuttered his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, he forced himself to see with what felt like the physical exertion of a clean and jerk. He would see, he would speak. His M-I-E-N, his voice, his gaze would be his weapon. These were the crucial seconds. "How much are they paying you?" Ambler demanded. "Enough," the specialist replied impassively. "Wrong," Ambler said. "They're playing you for a fool, und kann." Ambler tossed the heavy .44 pistol to the ground, did so before he was even aware of having decided to. Ironically, he felt much safer now. The fact that he was unarmed would lessen the pressure for an immediate kill. Sometimes you make the best use of a weapon by giving it up. "Don't talk," the specialist said. But he was vain about his financial savvy, Ambler knew. The taunt had bought him another few moments of life. "Because after you kill me, they're going to kill you. This operation, it's an SCO. You understand what this means?" The specialist took a step toward him, his reptilian eyes unblinking, displaying all the warmth of a cobra toward a rodent. "A self-cleaning oven," Ambler said. "That's when we design an operation so that all the operational participants kill each other off. It's just a precaution, an SCO, a sort of auto-erase feature." The killer from Marseille stared dully, betraying only a modicum of interest. Ambler let out a short, bark-like laugh. "That's why you're perfect, for their purposes. Cunning enough to kill, too stupid to live. Ideal casting for an SCO. "You bore me with your lies." Yet he would hear Ambler out, impressed by his victim's very effrontery. "Trust me, I've helped design enough of them. I remember the time we sent a specialist like you to take out a mullah in one of the Malaysian islands. Guy had been doing money laundering for some of the jihadis, but he had a cult following among the locals, so we couldn't afford to leave a trail. Sent another guy, a munitions tech, to put a Semtex pack on the little Cessna turboprop the specialist was set to use for exfiltration. A Semtex pack with an altitude trigger. Then the specialist got instructions to terminate the munitions tech, which he did, just before he took off in the Cessna. 3 minus 3 equals 0. The math worked out beautifully, always does. Same equation here, and you'll never see the minus sign until it's too late." "You would say anything," the specialist said, testing him. "Men in your position always do." "Men facing death? That describes both of us, my friend, and I can prove it." The look Ambler gave the assassin was disdainful rather than fearful. A micro flicker of confusion and interest. "How?" "First, let me show you a copy of the Sigma A23 44D transmission. I've got a copy in my inside jacket pocket." "Don't make a move." The specialist's deep-set eyes turned into slits, his knife-thin mouth into a sneer. "You must think I'm an amateur. You'll do nothing at all." Ambler shrugged and held his hands up at shoulder level. "Take it out of my pocket yourself, then," Ambler said evenly. "It's in the top right inside pocket. Yank down the zipper. I'll keep my hands in view. Point is, you don't have to take my word for any of this, but if you want to keep your miserable goddamn life, you're going to need my help." "I doubt that very much." "Believe me, I don't give a shit whether you live or die. It's just the only way I can save my ass is by saving yours." More nonsense. "Fine," Ambler replied. "You know what an American president used to say? Trust but verify. Let's try a variant. Distrust but verify. Or are you afraid to find out the truth?" "You fucking move and I blow your brains out," the specialist barked as he grimly approached, holding up the gun in his right hand, reaching for the zipper puller with his left. The metal pull tag lay concealed within the zipper placket, just under the collar of Ambler's micro-fleece-lined winter jacket. It took 2 tries before the slider moved down the zipper chain. Now the man stepped closer to Ambler, groping around inside his jacket, feeling for the inside pocket. The flesh of the man's face seemed to cover his skull like a coating of hard rubber. Ambler could smell the man's meaty, slightly sour breath. His seemingly lidless eyes were colder than the mountain air. Timing was everything. Ambler composed himself into a state of willed serenity, a state of pure waiting. To make his move too early or too late would be easy and fatal. Rational thought would provide no reliable guide. He had to be mindful while banishing reflection, cognition, calculation, the encumbering leg irons of conscious thought. The world was gone now. The mountains, the air, the ground beneath his feet, and the sky above his head had vanished. Reality consisted of 2 pairs of eyes, 2 pairs of hands. Reality consisted of anything that moved. Now the specialist had discovered that the inner pocket was itself zippered horizontally, and the assassin's left hand was insufficiently dexterous to move the slider. When he tugged at the pull tag, it pulled the fabric tape into which it was sewn, impeding the slider's movement. As he fumbled, Ambler bent his knees slightly, an exhausted man, diminishing himself further. Then he closed his eyes with the slow resignation of a migraine sufferer. The specialist was dealing with someone who had not only shed his pistol, but was no longer even watching him. Sometimes you make best use of a weapon by giving it up. There was reassurance there, at once profound and subliminal, a mammalian gesture of surrender, like a dog exposing its throat to mollify a more aggressive dog. Timing. Frustrated, the specialist removed his hand, his awkward left hand. Ambler, bending his knees farther, lowered himself a little more. Timing. The specialist would have no choice but to shift his gun from his right to his left, an operation that would take no longer than a second. Even with his eyes shut, Ambler felt and heard the assassin start to make the quick switch. Time was metered out in milliseconds. The gun was being passed to the man's left hand. His left index finger would be extending toward the trigger guard, feeling for the curved apostrophe of steel within it. Even while Ambler was bending his knees just a little farther, hanging his head down like a bashful child. He was no longer thinking, just giving himself over to instinct altogether, and now. Ambler surged forward and upward, the coiled strength in his legs immense, his lowered head ramming into the other man's jaw. He felt and heard the man's teeth slamming together, the bone-jarring vibration traveling upward through his cranium, and then moments later, the neck snapping back, the startled reflex causing the man's hand to spring open. Ambler heard the sound of a gun clattering to the pavement, and now. Ambler's head smashed downward in a powerful reverse arc, the top of his forehead shattering the specialist's nose. The man from Marseille collapsed to the pavement, a rictus of shock on his face, giving way to the slackness of insentience. Ambler collected the silenced gun, snaked his way through the woods behind the custom house with snow-muffled steps, and then crept back to the shoulder of the road. Technically, he supposed he had just crossed the border between France and Switzerland. Along the paved shoulder, the assortment of engine parts by the food service truck was even larger than it had been. But the big-bellied, thick-set mechanic was no longer bent over the engine. He was some distance away from it, one finger pressed to his ear, walking calmly toward Ambler, his paunch straining at his grease-smudged overalls. The man's face was jowly and unshaven, his expression the familiar mixture of boredom and resentment found among the French home T-O-U-T-F-A-I-R-E. He was whistling a Serge Gainsbourg tune off-key. He looked up as if he had just noticed Ambler and gave him a wry nod. A wave of dread swept over Ambler. In situations of extremity, he found himself acting, time and again, before he had consciously decided to act. This was one of those times. He yanked a silenced pistol from his jacket and leveled it, even as he found himself staring into the bore end of a large caliber gun that, with the legerdemain of a magician finding nickels in thin air, had materialized in the other man's beefy hand. "Salute," the man said in the G-A-R-A-G-I-S-T-E overalls said. He spoke with the slightly Teutonic vowels of Savoyard French. "Salute," Ambler replied as, Now. He kicked out his legs from under himself and, in free fall, squeezed the trigger not once but 3 times, the quiet spitting sound of each round accompanied by an incongruously forceful recoil. With near simultaneity, the Savoyard's long-barreled magnum blasted away exactly where Ambler's head had been an instant before he had dropped himself to the ground. Ambler landed rockily, but with more grace than the gunman in overalls. As blood gouted from the man's chest, wisps of steam formed in the cold air above it. After a few spastic coughs, the man fell still. Now Ambler detached the Savoyard's keyring from his belt and found the key to his van. It had been parked 30 yards to the east of the checkpoint, decorated with a logo in both French and German, Garage/Autochaniker. Seconds later, Ambler headed down the road into Switzerland toward the town of St. Martin, stopping only briefly to retrieve his travel bag from beneath the roadside mound of snow. The checkpoint, France itself, had soon vanished from his rearview mirror. The van was, he discovered, surprisingly powerful. Its original engine must have been modified or replaced with one of greater horsepower. If he knew how these professionals worked, the mechanic's firm existed in name only. The plates would be innocuously registered, while the markings on the vehicle would ensure that it could appear anywhere and at any time without prompting suspicion. Wherever there were automobiles, there could be an automotive breakdown. Nor would the police be inclined to stop such a vehicle for breaking speed limits. Though it was not exactly an ambulance, such repair vans were typically dispatched for automotive emergencies, including crashes. The vehicle's guise was well chosen. He would be safe in this vehicle, at least for a while. As he tore through the countryside, time was a blooming montage of sunlight and shadow, of streets filled with people and roads filled with motorists. Veering one way and then another, he navigated around small, officious cars and big, pavement-rumbling tractor-trailers. Everything seemed a conspiracy to impede his progress, or rather, his consciousness registered little except for such impediments. Meanwhile, the van itself gulped down the steepest grades with ease, its snow tires and 4-wheel drive gripping the pavement with assurance. The gears never strained, no matter how hard he stressed them. The engine never whined, no matter how hard he pushed the limits of its capacity. There were moments when he dimly recognized the dazzling beauty of his surroundings, the towering pines ahead of him that winter had turned into a castle of snow, a Neuschwanstein built from branches, the mountain peaks that punctuated the horizon like the sails of distant ships, the roadside freshets fed by mountain streams that continued to gush even while all around them was frozen. Yet his mind was consumed with the imperative emotion of speed. He had decided that he could safely drive this vehicle for 2 hours, and in those 2 hours he had to consume as much of the distance between him and his destination as he possibly could. At the end of the line there was dangers to be confronted, dangers to be averted, but there was hope as well. And there was Laurel. She was there, would have arrived already. His heart swelled and ached as he thought of her, his Ariadne. Oh God, he loved her so. Laurel, the woman who had saved first his life and then his soul. It did not matter how beautiful the landscape was. Anything that separated him from Laurel was, simply by virtue of this, detestable. He looked at his watch, as he had been doing obsessively since he had entered Switzerland. Time was running out. Another steep ascent of the Alpine road, followed by a shallower descent. He kept the accelerator pedal at or near the floor, grazed the brake pedal only when absolutely necessary. So close and yet so far, so many gulfs behind, so many gulfs ahead.